Welcome, everybody, to the first ever June edition of the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show. Along with Zach Meisel, I'm Adam the Bull, and we've got a lot to get to. I would say an uneven week for the Guardians, who lost 2 out of 3 to the Rockies before winning 2 out of 3 from the Nationals. But, Zach, this week, they actually did what you hate when they did all the time, what they did all the time last year, which is lose the Sunday game to kill the weekend momentum. They haven't done much of it, but they did this weekend.
And now they have no momentum going into the biggest series of the year, as we all predicted, Guardians Royals in early June.
Who would have thought that was as big a series as it was? But it is pretty big. Plus, Steven Kwan returns and a debut for a guy whose name is going to get screwed up 1,000 times. That's all coming up on today's Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show. It's Schneeman. Schneeman, right? Is that how you say it? Schneeman?
Double E, double N.
Yeah. It's actually, I mean, how else could you pronounce it, I guess? It's long, but I don't think it's that complicated.
It's just, there's a lot of, it feels like you could, do we need all those letters?
Yeah, like cut it down. And as someone who has, who when I was a kid, I couldn't fill out the bubble sheets didn't get my whole name. I had to leave off the R at the end from the bubble sheet. I'm sure Daniel Schneeman had the same problem because his name's even longer than me. But yeah,
well, it's a good thing they have these newer, crappier uniforms now, because the lettering on everyone's uniform is smaller, so you can fit longer names.
True. It's a good point, right? Everybody hates the uniforms, but there is the one positive. Right. It's not the longest name, I think, was it William Van Landingham? Remember him on the Giants?
Well, they've got the guy on the Reds now.
Oh, and Encarnacion Strand.
Because
and Simeon Woods Richardson too on the Twins.
Yeah,
but that's kind of cheating because that's 2 last names and that's a new thing now with the combined last name, which I got no problem with. But that's not one name; it's really 2 names.
What about Asher Wojciechowski?
Yeah, that was a long one.
He was in spring training with Cleveland a few years ago.
I still think William Van Landingham in terms of the solo names, although I guess you could argue it's 2 last names too, Van and Landingham. But it's really 1 last name. It just sounds.
Todd Hollinsworth was in Cleveland.
Hollinsworth, yeah.
It's the ones where it goes from like your left hip to your right hip.
Right. Yeah, it's I was gonna say a semicircle, but it's more like an oval or a semi-oval, I guess. But he did make his major league debut. He had a lot of people in town on Sunday, and he got a hit in his first major league game. That was exciting.
His story is really cool.
Yeah.
He was the 33rd rounder. They don't have 33 rounds anymore.
Nope.
And, as a minor leaguer, like, he was a utility guy. He was a guy who he was valuable to have at every level, because with so many guys in the minor leagues coming and going from affiliate to affiliate, or needing to go on a developmental list to figure out how to get better, or like, you need guys like that. He can fill in at any position. He added outfield to his repertoire. And over the offseason, he made some swing changes. We've seen a lot of this throughout the organization lately, where guys are selling out for a little bit more power, just trying to do whatever they can to hit the ball hard. And you saw the results in the minors this year at AAA, where his everything was up. Like, the metrics all looked a lot better. You're seeing the power numbers. He had 10 home runs, extra base hits. He's always been good drawing walks, and the plate discipline has always been there. So it's been impressive. Just like a kid who in spring training, they talked really highly of him, and you wondered, like, okay, they have so many middle infielders anyway. Like, maybe if some guys get hurt and they need somebody to be a utility guy for a week or 2, he'd get the call. But he really put himself on the map by making the changes he needed to make. And it's just cool when you see that hard work pay off. I mean, he's 27 years old. He has a kid. His family, they were all at the game on Sunday. And so it's one of those cool stories. And a lot of credit goes to the work he's put in over the years.
And I hope we don't see less. I'm worried we're going to see, as the years go by now, less of those stories, because obviously a couple of years ago, they cut down the rounds of the draft, but you might say, well, that doesn't matter. They can still pick up undrafted guys, which is true, and they do. However, when they cut, I think it was 41 minor league teams out of systems, it used to be teams had 6 or even 7 minor league affiliates, and now teams only have 4. And so there's less guys in the minors. So there's a guy who takes really long to develop. He might get cut. And, now we are seeing, I feel like in the last couple of years, a lot more guys pop back into the minor league systems after some, at least from some time, going to Korea or Japan more often, and certainly into the independent league, the Atlantic League. But I'm worried we're going to lose some of those stories, because when you see these stories of guys who were in the minor leagues forever, it's going to be hard to keep those guys around because there's not as many spots.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, so remember 2020, it was only 5 rounds because of the pandemic,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and so Cade Smith went undrafted.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, he
Sure.
would have been drafted, but it is like he talked about just kind of the uncertainty of that year and not knowing what was going to happen and where you go. And then you sign with a team, but there's not, normally you have a good feel, and guys can pop up anywhere. Like Cody Allen was, I think, like a 23rd rounder.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mike Piazza.
guys can pop up at any time,
Yeah.
and especially relievers, like you never really know. But you do have some idea of like, okay, if things go well, this guy, this is his timeline, right?
Right.
And just with all the uncertainty, not just in 2020, but that sort of wrecked scouting for a couple of years. You weren't scouting as much, you didn't
Sure.
get as good of looks. And so I think we're back to more of a normal spot now. But for a few years, I think there were going to be a lot of guys who fell through the cracks just because you weren't able to get as many eyes on them as you normally would have. You weren't able to really get to know the player as well as you would have. Um, and so I think that could lead to some just you're going to see more guys pop up out of nowhere or develop on different timelines than maybe you anticipated. I think this guy's, I mean, look, he came in yesterday. The first pitch he sees, he rips it to right field. Next at bat, he hit an absolute missile to center that was caught in front of the warning track. But like that's I I don't know what to think of him. I don't know exactly like where he fits. I don't know that he's an everyday player in the future. Who knows?
Right.
But we've learned through guys like this making big changes at this age, or through David Fry, or through Ben Lively. Like sometimes you have to readjust your expectations because guys can make substantial changes to
Absolutely.
whatever they do later in your career.
And unlike John, like they send down Jonathan Rodriguez as part of this transaction, and Jonathan Rodriguez is a guy they want to make sure he plays every day. Where Schneemann is more of a guy where, okay, if he's not, if he's only starting once every 4 days or whatever it may be, I think they're more comfortable with that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they just faced a ton of lefties. So Rodriguez was
Yeah.
helpful there as a right-handed bat. They're still, we've talked about it, Bull. Like they're a bat or two short.
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah.
think they need another outfield stick. They need a right-handed hitter of some sort. They have the flexibility where whoever they add, you could play any position pretty much because you've got so many guys who can bounce around. But they're going to face a bunch of righties now coming up. So they felt, Jimenez was sort of day to day over the weekend. They wanted to be protected in the infield. Schneemann is a left-handed hitter, so that helps.
Yeah.
And they just felt like they weren't going to be playing Rodriguez much in the next week or so. And they've got a bunch of off days coming up. So
Yeah. True.
it's going to be interesting once they get through this little, I guess, 2-week stretch where they've got all these off days. They can really manipulate the lineup and stuff. Then it's going to be, okay, what are the roster moves? What do you want this lineup to look like every single day? Are you ready to make some decisions on Arias and Rocchio and Bo Naylor and Will Brennan? And Schneemann's got a little shot here now to prove that he should be part of this.
We started the show talking about Schneemann coming up, but obviously that's not the big story of the weekend in terms of guys joining the lineup. It's Steven Kwan. We talked last Monday that we thought he'd be back Friday, and it was exactly right. He plays Friday, and of course, he's Steven Kwan, so he goes 3 for 4 in his first game back after missing a month. They sit him Saturday because they're kind of giving him, pacing him a little bit to start. And he gets back in the lineup yesterday, goes 1 for 4. So 4 for 8 over the weekend in Steven Kwan's return. And he certainly didn't look like a guy who'd missed a month of action.
Did you have, who was like your ideal leadoff hitter when you were a kid or when you were growing up and fell
The
in love with
first name
baseball?
in those days, almost every team or certainly any good team, had a typical leadoff hitter. But the first name I think of when you asked me that question was Brett Butler. The
So
Cubs had a guy in the 80s named Bob Dernier. They got him from the Phillies. He was a good leadoff hitter, but I feel like every team had him. But the first guy I think of is Brett Butler. Or
doesn't Kwan resemble that throwback? Like he could have
100%.
thrived in the 70s, the
Oh, yeah.
80s, the
100%.
90s. He's hitting 362. It's crazy. I know we don't care about batting average as much, but
I do when it's that high. When it's that high, I care. Yeah.
And every other stat looks great too.
Yeah.
I mean, his slugging percentage is almost 500. So I was talking to Earl over the weekend and we were reminiscing about like when we grew up, Kenny Lofton was the leadoff hitter in Cleveland, and he was everybody's dream leadoff hitter because the guy would hit for a high average, he'd draw walks, wouldn't strike out a ton, would steal bases, Gold Glover every year. And I'm not saying Kwan is like Kenny Lofton, but it was just ingrained in my head that that's what every leadoff hitter is supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is you set the table, you make pitchers and opposing defenses uncomfortable, and Kwan looks like that throwback.
Mm-hmm.
Like baseball got away from that. You've got Kyle Schwarber hitting leadoff in Philly, and the guy strikes out like 40% of the time.
I know.
So it's almost refreshing to see that leadoff hitter who's going to just rip singles and doubles and steal bases and then play really good defense. And it's no surprise then that after missing 4 weeks, he comes back and looks like he didn't miss any time at all.
Right. And bad job out of me not mentioning Kenny Lofton with the leadoff hitters that popped in my head, but it didn't pop into my head for whatever reason. I actually mentioned Kenny Lofton on Twitter over the weekend because when Jose Ramirez scored from second on that wild pitch, I tweeted Kenny Lofton-esque because, yes, Steven Kwan at the plate certainly reminds me of Kenny Lofton, no doubt, and the way he is an old school leadoff hitter. But that play by Jose over the weekend was a Kenny Lofton type of play.
I've seen that. We've seen it 3 times now in Cleveland, at least with Lofton.
Yeah.
Jason Kipnis in Game 7 of the World Series.
Yes, that was crazy, that one.
And now Jose, which I mean, it's the entire way. I feel like we see this once or twice a year with him, where he beats out an infield single, steals second, and then scores from second on a wild pitch. It's just manufacturing a run, which, hey, good players do that, right? Smart base runners do that. You have to have instincts and awareness, but rarely do you see your star player who's your main power source do that. Like I haven't. Aaron Judge is maybe probably the best hitter in the world. I haven't seen him play that way. So there's nothing the guy can't do. It's remarkable.
This past week, the Guardians go 3-3. I mean, since the start of May, the only 2 series they've lost are to the 2 worst teams in baseball. I guess that's just baseball, as they would say, right? They lost 3 out of 4 to the White Sox, and then the next series they lost was earlier this week when they lose 2 out of 3 to the Rockies. They do take 2 out of 3 to the Nationals, but when you look at how the pitching was awful in Colorado. Are you now? And listen, Colorado hasn't played this year typically, big offense. Part of it's they're a terrible team. But are you just going? It's Colorado 3 days, even though they haven't been that way, or is there something more to it from how bad they pitched there?
I think it's all the above. I think I'm going. It's Colorado. I don't want to put too much stock into it, but I also don't need to put too much stock into it because I have major concerns about the rotation anyway.
Yeah,
I mean that is the. I don't want to say Achilles heel because they're 39-20. It hasn't hamstrung them too much yet.
Right.
But it could. It will.
Certainly.
They need to figure out some solutions. Gavin Williams is one, but that's not enough. And so you need McKenzie to look like a frontline starter. You need Tanner Bybee to continue doing what he's been doing, but then you have to go outside and look for help elsewhere. I don't know how long you can ride Carlos Carrasco. Ben Lively's been incredible, but that's an awful lot to put on the plate of a journeyman who's never done this before for another 4 months. And then you hope a postseason run. So this team's in a really good spot. They're in first place. They've one of the best records in baseball. There are a lot of reasons to believe that it's somewhat or very legitimate, and their needs are obvious.
Yes.
So it's not like you're scratching your head thinking like, wonder where we could upgrade this roster. No, it's pretty apparent. And I think the rotation is the place you look at first.
We're going to talk more about that. You and I talked some about trades last week, and then we kind of followed up what you and I were talking about on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, and got into some stuff with the Blue Jays and potentially the Marlins. So we'll talk more about that in just a second. But right now, let me talk to you about FanDuel, folks. If you are thinking about, getting involved in daily fantasy, let me tell you something. FanDuel is awesome. It's daily fantasy. You can bet on anything, frankly, almost any sport. It's winner take all time in the NBA, NHL, Stanley Cup Finals, NBA Finals, giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/UCSS and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. All right. So Zach, we were talking last week. We talked a little bit about it, and Bo Bichette came up, and we talked about it more on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show as well. And yes, pitching is definitely the first priority. I think they need a shortstop as well. I'm sick of Arias and Rocchio. I'm not saying we have to give up on them permanently, but I think now listen, in terms of just pitching, Jesus Luzardo makes a ton of sense with Miami. We know they're trading away guys. They have the second worst record in baseball, I believe. And Jesus Luzardo's a proven pitcher. I know he got off to a slow start this year, but since coming back from the injured list, he's been fantastic, like he's been the last couple of years. I do like the Blue Jays rotation. I'd be interested in almost anybody in their rotation of their top 4 guys. And I think that a combination, and I understand it would cost a lot to get Bo Bichette and a pitcher from Toronto. I get it. But the Guardians have been sitting on so many prospects, and I don't know what the worth is of any or all of them at this point. But they need to be aggressive. We're into June now. I'm not saying it has to happen today or even this week, but they've got to be aggressive at some point in the next 6-8 weeks here, because I think with at least one legitimate veteran starting pitcher and the shortstop, I want to get greedy and get both, that this team is a World Series contender. I believe that. But they're short right now. And it doesn't mean they couldn't get there, because we've seen crazier things that happen. The 2017 Indians team was better than the 2016 Indians team that went to the World Series. So it doesn't always work out the way you think. But I think they're two good pieces away, and I hope they're aggressive. I'm hoping that they will spend money this season. What say you on that?
People always say, oh, you just have to get hot at the right time and anything can happen. And I always counter that. You know how you can get hot at the right time? By having the team that has the best chance of getting hot.
Yeah.
Which means talent.
That's right.
And so I'm with you. You don't want to take a start like this and waste it. Like, these don't come around often, even for teams that were expected to be good. There's a lot of teams in the league right now where we thought the Astros and the Rangers would be good, and those teams are under 500. We thought the Blue Jays and Rays would be good. Those teams are under 500. So you want to capitalize on this, and there are some hurdles, but there's a lot working in their favor where it would make sense to go be aggressive. Make this be the summer that you put your stamp on.
Yep.
Hey, we're here for the next few years at least, and we plan to contend for a World Series. And by the way, end a drought that's gone on for 3/4 of a century.
It's enough. Let's
go. That should be in the back of everybody's minds.
Yep.
So I think the one big obstacle here is that you want to go get a starting pitcher. You need an ace or a number 2 or something like that. Someone you feel comfortable handing the ball to in a key playoff game. That's great. That's also what the Orioles need. That's also what, National League teams need. Like the Dodgers, you
Right.
always have to worry about them getting in on that. So that's tough. The Orioles have an unbelievable farm system with guys that, they can match or exceed any team's offer, right? So
and to back up your point, Zach, before you continue, the Orioles already have an ace.
Yeah.
The Guardians don't really have an ace. They have guys who could potentially be aces, but we don't have a Corbin Burns on this team, a guy proven at that level. So they're already ahead of the game in terms of the pitching in the playoffs.
And Burns is a rental. So if you're the
Right.
Orioles, you're thinking, hey, if we can get Luzardo, even if we lose Burns this offseason in free agency, we still have a frontline guy.
Yeah.
So it's going to be tough. That's why I think your plan A is go get a starting pitcher and a hitter and a complementary piece for the bench or the bullpen or something, or another starter. But I think you need to be realistic too. And if you can't get the starter that you want, can you get a mid-rotation guy who can eat innings plus an impact bat plus a second part-time bat? Like this doesn't need to be just one move. This doesn't need to be just one, well, we're going to go for the best guy, and if we don't get him, we'll try again next year.
Right.
No, like there's a lot here you can do. I mean, I keep going back to 2016 when they traded for Andrew Miller, but they tried to trade for Jonathan Lucroy and shore up their catching position. And then they swung a trade for Brandon Guyer, who paid huge dividends as a lefty killer off the bench. So there are ways to improve. The thing that's going to be interesting is there are so many teams. It's a really weird season. If you look at the standings, like the Yankees and Orioles are going to be in the playoffs. They're going to be really tough outs. That's it. There's like the Mariners have been slightly above 500 all year. They don't score runs.
Yeah, Kansas City.
Yeah, Kansas City and Minnesota. Like the Central's got to sort itself out.
Yep.
But I do think like there's so many teams hovering around 500 that are going to have to just decide, do you want to sell or do you want it? Like Tampa. I know Rosarena's had it down here.
Right.
But like the Rays, they're 2 games under 500. Their run differential's minus 53.
Yeah.
At some point, they might have to retool, and that's a team that becomes really interesting. They've got some pitchers that could help or part-time bats. The Astros, I don't know what their plan is. There's plenty of teams in the National League and the NL Central especially that are hovering around 500. So once you start to separate the buyers and the sellers, and we have a better idea of, because it's how much quantity is there.
Right.
We keep throwing around Luzardo's name, but big part of that is because the Marlins are one of the few teams we can guarantee will be selling. So we need to learn who else will.
I mean, I know not all these guys are going to be a fit for the Guardians. Some of them are lefties. Some of them may be out of the price range. But, you look at Cincinnati. They've got Frankie Montas. They got Jonathan India that could be an interesting trade chip. You look at the Mets, Pete Alonso. Like, I don't know the Mets. I doubt the Guardians are going to go get a first baseman who's a rental. But, man, would Pete Alonso look good in the middle of that lineup. If the Cubs, who have been, got off to a great start, but they've been terrible for the last month, if they fall out of it, they could trade Bellinger. St. Louis, Goldschmidt and Arenado, although they've played better lately. So there's some interesting guys on all these teams that even a guy like, and I can't remember if I mentioned him with you last week or if I mentioned him on UCSS, but and I know the Guardians bullpen's been good, but if you made a trade with Toronto, maybe you could also get Yimi Garcia.
Why have I heard you mention that name like 1,000 times?
Yeah, there you go.
That's your guy.
I keep I like these low whip setup guys. Like I don't pay attention to ERAs of relief pitchers. I pay attention to strikeout rate and whip. How many base runners are they putting on? And he's a guy that consistently doesn't put base runners on. Well, and so there's guys and those guys, there's a guy like that on every team that's available, probably.
And then you think, okay, if you can't go get a top line starting pitcher, can you just shorten the game? I mean, that is how they got to the World Series in 2016 with 2 9/10 starting pitchers.
Yeah.
Is they just, if you got through 4 innings, you were good. So go add another reliever and take your top ranked bullpen to another level. That's an option too.
Yeah. Let's get some fan comments here, some fan reaction. Here we go. Old Ben, Kwan with 3 hits in his return. Bussin' nuts. We should get Trevor Bauer. I know what I'm saying there. They're not getting Trevor Bauer. The ship has sailed. Any further comment, Zach? We've talked about this before. They're not.
People can keep clamoring for him. It's never going to happen.
I don't think he's ever getting a job in the majors again. If it was going to happen, it would have happened already, wouldn't it? At this point,
what would be the most likely team to sign him?
The Yankees? Nah, it's New York.
I was going to say like the White Sox.
Okay, that makes sense. Right. Yeah. You haven't heard his name connected to any team ever since he's been gone. It's
No,
not
and
happening.
I think I said this on like our first episode, but if of all the teams, all 30 teams, the
Yeah.
Guardians are probably like the 31st most likely to
Yeah.
sign him.
Not going to happen. Craig, let's go Bull and Zach. Thank you. Even though you spelled Zach's name wrong, I see you corrected it, Craig. Good job out of you. Marty, might be time to move on from Carrasco. William says they should trade for Rengifo from the Angels. He's a nice player.
He's having a
I don't
good
want to
year.
make him. They said make him the starting second baseman and move Jimenez to short. I'd rather get a better player than I like. If you bring in Rengifo to be a utility guy, I'm good with that.
They have liked him. Like
Yeah, I
they
like
were
him too.
interested in him a few years ago. I think they talked Clevenger trade with the Angels.
Right, he's a good player.
The problem with the middle infield is like if you're going to acquire someone, like it needs to be Bichette level because you
Yes,
still have you don't know what you have in Brito,
right.
Tana, Angel Martinez.
I don't think. Obviously, I would have to trade. You're not going to trade Gavin Williams, and you're not going to trade Manzardo. And those guys are already in the big leagues. But of the guys who have either, besides Manzardo, of the guys who have either not been to the big leagues or not proven anything in the big leagues, to me, there's nobody off the table. Like if I got to trade Chase DeLauter, I'm trading Chase DeLauter. If I can get good, obviously I got to get, I'm not trading him for a nothing player, but
Would you trade him for Luzardo?
oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And you got Luzardo for what? Is it 2 more years? Is it 2 years?
2 years after this one, I believe.
Oh, so he's got 3. Yeah, I'll double check that. But I
Through
think
26.
yeah. Oh, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I just imagine. I don't know who they're going to take number one because
Yeah,
that's important too.
yeah,
They can replenish some of this whatever they lose in
right,
prospects in trades with what should be the best draft class of any team, right? So that helps. It'll be either that Bazana or Condon with the number one
right.
pick.
One of the
Let's say it's
hitters.
Bazana,
Yeah,
who's a second baseman, Oregon State, kid from Australia. Theoretically, like maybe you go trade for, and we're dreaming here. It's hypotheticals, and
yeah,
this kind of thing never happens. Let's say they trade for Bo Bichette, and Bo Bichette is your shortstop for the next year and a half, and he's
right,
giving you all-star level production, teaming with Andres Jimenez. That's a dream middle infield.
right.
And then Bo Bichette leaves in free agency, and oh, what do you know? Here's
That's
Travis Bazana, your number one prospect, to take over at second
that's right.
base. Jimenez slides to shortstop. And
Beautiful.
then you never have to worry about Arias and Rocchio and
That's
Tana
right.
and Martinez and all those guys you stockpiled for years.
It's the other day when I was talking about trading for him for Bichette, somebody was like, "Let's just get pitching. The shortstop's good enough. I don't want good enough. I don't want to settle for good enough. I
He
want the
hasn't been.
Guardians to fill their holes and be all in." You talked about this. This is the summer to do it because there's no short thing team. I get it. Baltimore and the Yankees both look really good right now, but they're not. It doesn't to me at least feel like an insurmountable task to beat either of those teams in the postseason.
No, and only one of them can win their division.
That's right.
So, like, you're chasing a first round bye
Right.
and a guaranteed spot in the division series. Like, it's not like you're pinning all your hopes and dreams on a coin flip best of 3
Right.
like you had in 2022. So, no, I'm with you. And it doesn't, when we say all in, like, it's not like this is the one shot at it. Like,
No,
you're still going to
absolutely not.
have Williams and Bybee and Kwan and Ramirez and Naylor and Jimenez. Like, you have a
Right.
good foundation.
That's
So
right.
it's time. You got to add to it now while you're off to this awesome start. And then you can set yourself up for several years here. So it's yeah, there's no excuse for it.
No.
I think they're smart enough, like they know that. They're
Yeah.
again, we've mentioned 2016 where in June of that year, they went on a 14-game winning streak. It opened everybody's eyes, and then they were really aggressive at the deadline, and it
Yeah.
helped. I mean, without Andrew Miller, they're not in the World Series. 2011, even like we knew that team was not
Right.
30-15 good, even though
No.
that's the start they got off to. But same thing where they were like, "Hey, this is the start of something." They were wrong, kind of. They needed Terry Francona and other help to get there, but
Right.
they went and traded for Ubaldo Jimenez, who was the best pitcher in the market. So, and they gave up a lot to get him. So it's they've shown instances in the past, this front office group where they've been aggressive in situations like this, and to me, this seems like a no-brainer.
Right. And you can't be afraid to trade prospects that, even if they pan out, it is what it is. You're right. At the time, it was considered a lot what they gave up for Ubaldo, but those guys didn't pan out. Right.
No.
Alex White was, I can't remember if he made the majors. If he did, he barely did.
He did in
Drew,
Cleveland and had a
right.
little bit in Colorado, and that was it.
And Drew Pomeranz had like 1 or 2 good years as a reliever. And now he actually just was up in the majors for 1 day with, I think, the Dodgers or somebody. I can't remember who it was, for 1 day, and then he got DFA'd. So, you can't worry about those things. You're right. If you make those, you still have a lot of good young players. You're not giving up everybody, but you got to be aggressive, and they have not been in recent years. And I get it to some degree, but now is definitely the time. But anyway, before we wrap up for the day, let's look ahead to what, again, we said it's surprising before the season, but what should be an exciting series against the Kansas City Royals is the Guardians have not played a lot of division games to this point in the season. They've played the Tigers and the White Sox. That's it. They haven't played they played Minnesota, right? When they played Minnesota?
Yeah, just 5 games.
Right in April, right at the beginning of April. And then did they play them again recently, or no, it was just it was just in the beginning of April, right? That's it.
Well, they swept them at home.
Oh, yeah. What the hell am I talking about? That's right. In the middle of May. Where was I? I was lost for that. But they haven't played Kansas City yet. And so they're playing them for the first time now. The first game is tomorrow. McKenzie and Lugo, Allen and Singer on Wednesday. Thursday, Bybee against have they picked this, or are they still TBD for Thursday?
Last I saw was TBD.
Okay. Seth Lugo, worth mentioning here. This guy was with the Mets forever. He always wanted to be a starter. They never let him be a starter. He pitched out of the pen. He did a decent job, bounced around a little bit the last couple of years. And now, at 34 years old, he's having an unbelievable season. He's 9-1. I don't pay attention to record much, but 9-1 is impressive. With a 1.72 ERA, a 101 whip. He has 66 strikeouts in 78 innings, only 14 walks, but he's only given up 61 hits and 15 earned runs in 78 innings. He has been sensational, having a massive career year. So it should be a fun game tomorrow.
I still need to see a lot more to really believe in them. I think they'll be a thorn in the side, a team that finishes with like 83 wins maybe. But their stars are playing like stars. Salvador Perez, Bobby Witt, those guys have had sensational seasons. And the pitching,
Tino has bounced back this year after an injury.
Yeah, this franchise. Remember, they drafted so many first-round starting pitchers. Thought that they were building Cleveland Southwest.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. Like none of those guys panned out. So then they went the free agent route. And it's no surprise their pitching coach Brian Sweeney was in Cleveland for 5 years. Yeah. Very highly thought of, and now their pitching has been great.
Yeah, isn't it funny that the two teams that have improved their pitching the most this year in the American League, the Royals and the Yankees, both have former Cleveland guys in their bullpen? Not surprising at all. Zach, great stuff as always. As Craig reminds you in the chat right now, folks, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you're following us both on Twitter. Make sure you're checking out Zach's podcast, of course, with TJ as well. Selby is Godcast, which is a great name, of course. And anything else, Zach? Any final thoughts for 10 seconds?
No, Guardians. This is the season of would you have believed if I told you in blank? And the answer is always no.
And to all the newcomers, especially newcomers in the media who talk about baseball usually 3 days a year, welcome. I'm not going to be a hater. Enjoy this Indians love and Guardians love and have some fun with it. We'll talk to you next time on the Ultimate Cleveland Guardian Show.